This is Points of Clarity, the CMO interview series from Clear M&C Saatchi. Each interview covers one topic, features two speakers, and in just 3 short questions aims to deliver total clarity. We'll be starting shortly, so do enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to Points of Clarity, the CMO interview series from Clear M&C Saatchi. My name is Garrett Jones, and I'm Clear's Global Marketing Director. Broadcast live on Zoom, YouTube, and LinkedIn, each interview we do covers one topic, features 2 people, and in just 3 questions, aims to deliver total clarity. In each episode, I'm joined by a senior brand and marketing leader to discuss how they manage the often chaotic world of modern marketing, and we do it in about 30 minutes, so it's a bit of a quick ride. This week, I'm joined by Tom Fishburne, better known to many of you as the Marketoonist. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll be chatting about some of the issues we raised in our piece From Chaos to Clarity, Clear's global study into the future role of the marketing function, which we published earlier this January. Tom Fishburne, as many of you know, started drawing cartoons on the backs of business cases as a Harvard Business School student. And from an emailed cartoon to co-workers in 2002, Tom's Marketoonist series has grown by word of mouth to reach a few 100,000 marketers every week. And his cartoons have been featured by the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, Marketing Week, and the New York Times. His cartoons have twice appeared on billboard ads in Times Square and helped win a Guinness World Record. He's the founder of the Marketoonist, a marketing agency focused on the unique medium of cartoons. And since 2010, they've developed marketing internal communication campaigns for businesses such as Google, IBM, LinkedIn, Adobe, and of course, Clear M&C Saatchi. Tom draws literally and figuratively from over 20 years in the marketing trenches in the US and Europe. He was Interim Chief Marketing Officer at HotelTonight, Marketing Vice President at Method Products, and worked in brand management for Nestle and General Mills. Tom developed websites for interactive agency IXL and started his marketing career selling advertising for the first English language magazine in Prague. So really well traveled. So now I've built you up, Tom, let's get down to business. We started working with you in the middle of 2020 to help us bring From Chaos to Clarity to life in a way that we wanted to connect with the real day-to-day experiences and frustrations of modern marketers. What was it that excited you about the study? What got you involved?
Well, first of all, there's no shortage of chaos last year, that's for sure. I've been drawing these cartoons now for 20 years, and it started as a little bit of a diary of my life in marketing, and to suddenly see everything change in such a short period of time last year, it was so ripe for investigation, and I was really attracted to this study that it was, a real deep dive look into how marketing is changing. Scott Galloway has this wonderful observation that COVID-19 was an accelerant, not a change agent. And I think there's really some truth in that. It wasn't a lot of new things necessarily happening as much as it was an acceleration of things that were already underway. And so I found it really interesting to kind of deep dive into how in a very short period of time, we saw some of the ramp up effects of some of the changes that have been happening in the world of marketing for a while. Yeah,
it's been a hell of a year. I mean, it's 12 months. I mean, we were talking yesterday, my daughter's first birthday was Monday. She's a COVID-19 baby. She's a lockdown baby. And so much of her experience has been through screens. And it's difficult to engage with people through screens. It's difficult to make people smile through screens. And one of the things we love about your work is that it has that happy knack of making people smile whilst also really cutting to the very heart of whatever matter you're covering with really great clarity. What's your take on the role of humor in getting folks to engage with those really knotty and difficult and hugely important strategic challenges that we're all faced with today?
I think that's actually when we need humor most of all, when times are tough and topics are sometimes challenging to discuss. Humor can make the medicine go down a little bit. So that's one primary role that humor can play. It helps you talk about things that are otherwise hard to talk about. And I think there's a real belonging sort of connective effect with humor. When you're laughing collectively, at something with each other. It's, I think that has a real cathartic effect. And in the world of marketing, this is the changes that are addressed in the study are things that we're all going through together at the same time. And so humor gives us a chance to sort of laugh at some of the absurdities. Nobody has all the right answers. We're all figuring this all out. I've tried to, over the course of the 20 years that I've been drawing my regular marketing cartoons, if there's any butt of the joke, usually it's me trying to figure out what's going on around me. And so I find humor can really be cathartic in that way, because if you address difficult topics in too serious a way, it can sometimes make it harder to talk about. It can sometimes make it harder to be, to really tell some of the hard truths. So humor, I think, is just one of these essential things that's innately part of humans, and I think it's particularly important when times are a little bit difficult.
Yeah, and it's hugely important in business. Am I right in thinking you're working with a Stanford MBA program to bring humor to life for boardroom use?
Yes, that was a fascinating opportunity. I had a chance to work with two Stanford professors, Jennifer Acker and Naomi Bagdonis, and they pioneered the first ever MBA course about the power of humor in business. And invited me to be their cartoonist in residence a couple of years ago. So I got to sit in on the classes and draw cartoons and learn a bit about some of the academic research around humor. And it's really quite amazing the power that humor can have in our ability to persuade as leaders, and our ability to kind of build positive cultures. And so I learned quite a bit over the course of that project. But I love the idea that students are being instructed in this and then going off into their work lives. They identified something called the humor cliff, where they found research from Gallup a few years ago that measured the number of times, or the percentage of time that people can remember laughing really hard the day before. And they measured it over the course of an entire lifetime. I think they studied 1.4 million people around the world. And they found this funny chart where it's really high about up until the time when you graduate from uni and then start working full time. And then it just falls off this humor cliff, and then it continues to sort of drop progressively throughout your career, and then right around retirement it starts to ramp up again. And so it's this idea that we don't often bring our real selves, our humorous selves, to work, but there's so many great benefits to doing that when we can feel comfortable bringing our humorous sides to work. So they're big advocates of that, and their book just came out, which I highly recommend, called Serious Business. That's about, or Humor Seriously is the title, and it's really about a lot of these effects in how positive effects in business at large, but certainly marketing specifically benefits from this as well.
Yeah, I mean, if marketers can't laugh at themselves, then there's something wrong, because one of my favorite cartoons that you produced for our study was this one of the Too Many Hats, where you've got this CMO who's being pursued by people down a hallway.
Here I'll pull it up right here.
Here you go. Who's being asked to do so many different things, and it just illustrates one of the points that we make in the study, which is, marketing, the role of marketing has expanded so much and become so fragmented and so difficult to pin down that it's actually hard for marketers themselves to know which levers they still have control of. And it's also hard for the people in the wider audience within the business they're working in to understand what is it that this particular person in marketing does. I mean, you've seen this over the past few years. It's something that we picked up in the study. What's your perspective on that particular challenge that marketers face about having to juggle all of these different things at all these different same times?
Yeah, it's a crazy conundrum that marketers have never had more influence in certain ways, and yet the role has gotten so fragmented. We all know the classic 4 Ps in marketing, and they're powerful levers, but over time, the actual direct control over those levers have been reduced, so that in many cases marketing functions are only a small sliver of that. And so you end up with this dynamic of having responsibility for everything, but actual authority for small slivers. And that's something that early in my marketing career there was an element of that. I drew a cartoon once that showed a marketer in front of this vast machine with everything spinning around, and somebody saying, "This is your P&L. You have full responsibility for this P&L. If anything goes wrong, just pull that lever." And the guy asks, "What does the lever do?" And it cuts your marketing budget. Yeah. And so that was like, the lever basically is just reduced to that. But I think it's gotten more extreme over time, and particularly the last few years, as so many aspects of what make marketing are ultimately controlled by other groups. And then there are all these new things that have come online more recently that marketers have to get up to speed with. And so it really is like this cartoon shows everything from customer experience to designing Zoom backgrounds for the office. That's a challenge. It's hard to work within that. And I think a lot of the solution, I think a lot of what marketers have to learn to be good at is marketing by influence. Being able to kind of influence and inspire the rest of the C-suite, but also influence and inspire the rest of the organization who may not directly report to senior marketers, but ultimately are the real holders of brand experience. Everybody in the extended organization ultimately is part of the marketing team because they all have the ability to influence how a brand is received and perceived in the world.
They do indeed. It's one of those really interesting conundrums. I mean, you mentioned the 4 Ps at the beginning of that sort of discussion point. There's a terrifying stat. I can't remember where it was from. I think it was something that Mark Ritson picked up in one of his recent articles, that some horrifically high number, 70-some%, maybe, check it out. I think it'll be in his latest Marketing Week piece, but some ridiculous number of marketers couldn't name all 4 Ps. Yeah. And that tells me a huge amount about the focus on tactics over strategy that we have seen mushroom in the past decade in particular. I mean, I've been doing this 15 years now, which is terrifying, and really quite worrying. But but when you look over the last 15 years, the first 5 years of my career didn't include things like, the iPhone didn't exist. Facebook had only just launched when I left university, and these are things that have completely changed our world as marketers and continue to change our world every day. But they remain relatively tactical pieces. They remain channels, or they remain kind of things that you like create new Zoom backgrounds for. So my question really around this is, one of the things we found in the study was this bizarre kind of dichotomy, I guess, between marketing's supposed like never greater influence in the boardroom. I think something like 50% of CEOs, that we surveyed said marketing was the second most influential role on strategic growth after the CFO. And that's a great place for marketing to sit, because you can say, right, well, I can translate all of these different languages from the language of the customer to the language of technology to the language of data and insight to the language of creativity and price and product and place, and get ourselves into a really good place. But at the same time, there's this good Gartner study going around at the moment that says the CMO is still the least trusted member of the board. How does the CEO say, on one side of their mouth, they say, well, marketing's the second most important driver of our strategic growth. And on the other side, they say, well, I don't trust a word that my marketing team says.
I think a lot of it relates, some of what you described, how what defines marketing is kind of nebulous. But I think the fundamental issue is that too often marketing has been removed a little bit from the business vocabulary. My early marketing training was in FMCG in the UK, or CPG in the US, as they say, classic consumer products. And in environments like that, marketing was often seen as general management. In a marketing role, you had P&L authority, and you ultimately had to be able to at least voice what you were trying to do strategically in terms of business vocabulary that others would understand. And I feel like that was ultimately, as I look back on it, really useful training for me in my marketing career, because as I went on and did other things, I was always operating as a translator. I could get a business question and respond with a business answer. And I think that's useful for marketing in general to cultivate that ability, because when we get a business question and we respond with a marketing answer around engagements and psychographics and all sorts of vocabulary that others in the organization may not understand as innately as marketers who are constantly thinking about this stuff, it lowers a little bit of credibility. So I feel like that's one step. As part of the, like you said, it's a tremendous opportunity. Marketers have tremendous influence, but to take the next step to really have credibility I think finding a way to translate it, even when it's difficult, even if we can't tie a particular marketing activity directly to sales, at least talking in terms of the vocabulary of long-term brand benefit, translate it into how that'll ultimately impact business benefit. So I think that's a big kind of growth opportunity, which is exciting because marketers are best placed to drive a lot of the positive changes that we're talking about if we continue to evolve and adapt and become better business people.
Yeah, I think it's a hugely valuable point. I think one of the other cartoons you pulled up for us and drew for us was this sort of strategy getting stuck in the boardroom cartoon, which I don't know if you've got that one with you, but it was this fantastic cartoon which sort of had people sitting up in the boardroom above the clouds where the sun was out. And then at ground floor, you've got these poor people having to execute the strategy in the real world. And that often is a bit of a problem. It's like, how do you translate the messages of the boardroom into language that one of my old colleagues, a guy called Nick Liddell, used to say, how do you make sure that the lowest paid employee or the most recent hire understands exactly what it is you're supposed to be doing, and more importantly, how they can add value to the strategy and what they do day to day. And
Absolutely.
If your strategy isn't clear to them in that way, then it won't get actioned, it won't get delivered.
It's incredibly inspiring when you can do that all the way around, because those who are working in every aspect of the business, if they really understand what you're trying to do and how they can influence it, it's empowering. I had the opportunity kind of early in my marketing career. I was in charge of a yogurt business as part of my marketing responsibility, and I'm sitting in this marketing ivory tower in the headquarters office. But occasionally, at big encouragement from our CMO, he said, get out of the ivory tower, try to spend time across the organization, spend time in the customer support help desk, listening to actual customer calls. We had the opportunity to go to different factories and give presentations to people actually producing the yogurt on the factory floor. And it's a real gut check when you're used to presenting to other marketers, and then suddenly you're standing in front of an audience of people who work in a specific factory. You realize how much BS there can be in marketing, and you really have to translate that into commonly understood human language. And it's a good experience. I feel like when, everything that we do as marketers, when you can translate it in a real human way, it's inherently much more effective and impactful.
Yeah, it's that sort of walk a mile in their shoes piece, isn't it? I mean, we had Mark Evans, the managing director of marketing and digital at Direct Line Group, one of the UK's biggest insurers, on the show 2 weeks ago, on Friday 2 weeks ago, and we talked a lot about talent crisis in the marketing profession, because it's another one of the areas that we'll come on to in a minute. But he, I spoke to him a few years ago, and he talked to me about how he'd had to learn how to speak the language of the boardroom by not speaking all the time the language of marketing, by actually thinking through how to speak in the commercial tone and use the language that they use themselves to help to build trust, to help to build connectivity, to help to build areas of common understanding. Because we manufacture in our industry new language every single day, almost as quickly as we create new channels every single day. And we have to have a strategy overnight for all of these things. And unfortunately, those strategies never amount to much more than just fast channel tactics that feel like an adaptation of something you've already done before. And it's something that we'll come on to now, this idea of talent and time and ways of working. Because I know when we discussed this yesterday, we talked about the challenge of this crisis, but the challenge that marketers face more generally, whether in this crisis or not, is this constantly being reactive to the needs of the audience around them. And that cartoon you showed earlier was a good illustration of that. But if you're constantly reacting, how are you ever going to get to a place where you can be strategic? How are you ever going to get the time carved out in your day to be strategic? I want to talk to you a little bit about that talent crisis, though, which is, what's driving that that need to be reactive, that need to feel like you're doing something great? And what's also driving this sort of lack of trust in the CMO? Is it a talent gap? Is it a skills gap? What is it that's forcing people out of the profession, as this cartoon suggests?
Yeah, that was probably the most alarming kind of results that I saw in the study, that 20% of senior marketers don't see themselves wanting to be a CMO in their next role.
Oh, it's worse than that. The stat was the other way around. It was only 20% wanted to be a CMO.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, only 20% went. Yeah, I took it the pessimistic way in my head, but I translated. Yeah, that was shocking to me, and I feel like I feel like it needs to be addressed, and I don't know if it's commonly understood that is as big of an issue as it is. I think the CMO role is a tremendous opportunity, but it's understood differently in different organizations. And I think trying to find a way, I think there's an individual opportunity to continue to ramp up all of our skills, because no matter when or how we sort of join the marketing ranks, like there's continually things to learn, whether it's making sure there's a solid strategic foundation, or being open to change and learning some of the new tactics and tools that are coming along and putting them into a holistic framework. There's both ends of the spectrum, and I feel like that's inherently part of the role, is continuing to evolve and adapt and grow and learn. And the CMO role can be tremendously impactful, but I could see in the study how many are choosing CEO roles as opposed to CMO roles, because in that case you have more of the traditional authority. But I feel like that there's just a big gap and a big opportunity there.
Yeah, it's interesting. People told us that they were aiming for the CEO role. They told us they wanted to be consultants, which is interesting.
Yeah.
They also told us that they wanted to go and work at startups, and return to the skills that they once used. You know, that difference between being a kind of a general manager, to your point, pulling lots of other people's levers, or at least having some influence over those other levers, to actually pulling the levers directly yourself and saying, right, I'm back at the front line, working at the coalface, doing the stuff that I used to really enjoy. I'm affecting, hopefully, all of the 4 Ps all at once. I mean, one of the other questions I have around this is, is it just people who are coming into the profession who are not trained? I'll mention them a second time. Mark Ritson talks extensively about the lack of formal training in the current cohort of marketers, and how that is holding them back, and also pigeonholing them in the eyes of their colleagues in other divisions of the business as just those people who just do promotions, or that horrible phrase, the coloring in department.
Right.
And then the other side of that coin is, are there also people who have been in the profession who have that 4 Ps training down, who do still have control of all of those different levers? They can influence discussions on price. They can talk about product development and influence that product development piece. They can think about placement, and they can do the promotions piece. With all of those different elements, is there a reticence from them to learn new skills? Are they kind of holding themselves back from engaging with new thinking? What is it that you think on that side? Is it happening at both ends? Is it both people coming into the profession untrained and people who are trained not bringing themselves to new areas?
All of the above, absolutely, all of the above. I think humility has to be part of the marketing discipline, because there is always something to learn. And I find, going back to how I started drawing these cartoons, I was making fun of myself. Some of this stuff is difficult, and we're all adverse to change. It's difficult to continue to learn new skills. And so I think that's where, I try to acknowledge a little bit through my cartoons some of my own kind of failings and challenges as I'm trying to grow and adapt, as marketing continues to evolve. And I think that there's an opportunity, like you said, to learn more of the strategy. I think that the credibility in the C-suite will come as we develop more business chops in marketing, and can actually and can speak along those lines. And I think, like I said, it can vary a little bit on the organization. And I feel like, throughout our marketing careers, we need to develop a little bit of a good antenna on not only what our own capabilities are, but what environment are we walking into?
Yeah.
Are we walking into an environment where we can really have the impact that we want to have, and we have support, or at least we can cultivate that? Or certain climates are less adverse, and so kind of understanding the nature of that's pretty important too.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think one of the most interesting parts of the whole study for me actually was around this idea of opportunity for marketers, because we got into this lovely place where it was clear from the chief execs and from the CMOs and from everybody we talked to, 700 folk around the world from all sorts of different brands, that they felt like marketing had had not only an opportunity, but a responsibility to use all of those different skills and different levers and points of influence to really make change happen in businesses. You know, we talk about making change as a group, as MNC Saatchi, and that requires a set of skills that involves connecting the dots, speaking everybody else's language, and being able to translate those languages into a common lingua franca. I think there's also the ability to then really make sure that the voice of your customer is really understood at every level of the process, so that you don't end up developing products that have no buying, have no consumer buying case. They're not going to connect with a consumer group of any form because they've been developed in a vacuum. So there's all sorts of reasons why marketing can be and should be this beautiful strategic driver of change, but oftentimes, for all sorts of different reasons, doesn't quite get there. And I think there's a real chance now that if we can get out of this reactive way of working, which is difficult in a pandemic when you've got fewer people on staff and you've got your budget that's being cut because somebody else pulled that single lever in your cartoon. But you're in this place where actually, if you can make some time to be strategic and think carefully about the prioritization of different jobs you need to do, about the forces that are affecting your business, then you'll get yourself into a place where you can make real change happen. So I'm going to talk to you now about that ability to get out of reactive mode into creative mode or into strategic mode. How do you get out of that incessant pinging of emails or Slack messages or people Zooming you for no apparent reason? How do you get through that? And talk me through your creative process and how you built that and how you created that discipline.
Yeah, I feel like we have to make a concerted effort to carve out time for it. I've worked, most of the environments where I worked were big open plan offices where anybody could tap on your shoulder at any time. And it was this chaotic mosh pit. And it's hard to be strategic in that chaotic mosh pit. And I found when I shifted gears from my cartooning being sort of a nights and weekend hobby to something that I was doing as a business, I had to be much more deliberate about the deep thinking creative time. I studied a lot of artists and creative folks in terms of what their creative habits were. And some of this emerged organically. But for me, I dedicate the first 2 hours of every workday purely for deep thinking creative time, where I'm very deliberate about no phone, no digital devices, no access to the outside world. It's this precious, sacred time where I go through a few kind of sequential rituals to work on new ideas. And I really have to hold on to that space because it takes me a while to get into the zone where I'm feeling like I'm actually creative and a little bit detached from my inbox. And to get to a place where I can actually come up with new ideas. It's the most productive time of my entire workday. And in the grand scheme of things, 2 hours a day is not a big deal when it's ultimately creating the vast majority of your impact. And I feel like that's something that I think kind of more of us can have an opportunity to cultivate and hold on to. My inbox or my to-do list used to be entirely driven by my inbox. And that, to your point, inherently leads to just being reactive in our planning. But I find that when I carve this 2 hour time, it makes the rest of my day more productive because I've gotten the important stuff done and dusted and up to a different kind of level playing field. And then the rest of my day could just be ripples from that. And I eventually get back to my inbox and I respond to those things. But I feel like it took me, I had to be very deliberate about shifting gears that I was going to carve aside that time.
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful, a really, really important point to get across to everyone who's watching, because being reactive, being 100% reactive, is just the same as just managing decline. It's just managing the decline of either your own reputation and influence in a business or the brand reputation that you are responsible for managing in the market. If you are reactive at all times, that's all that will ever happen, because you will never create something of real impact. You will never create something of real distinctive value. And we talk a huge amount of clear. I mean, it's part of our name, right? You've got to be clear. You've got to be distinctive. You've got to be, if you can find it, some form of differentiation in the marketplace, which is hard, right? But you will never find that if all you do is react. If all you do is see stuff happening in front of you and go, I need to face that, or I need to do something about that. if you never step back to give yourself the time to think about the fact that actually that's not important. What's more important is the stuff that's coming in 6 or 12 months' time. And there's a lovely example from the study that we sort of picked up, I think, more in the press release than the study itself, but there's a lovely example of this. And it's from the world of COVID. So sorry to everybody who's bored of COVID content, but this is really important because it's what's going to help us get out of this crisis. And it's the reason why one of the brands that's involved has been able to help us get out of the crisis. So Pfizer and BioNTech invested in a new vaccine technology over a decade ago with no expectation that there would be a valid, sizable global use case. They weren't like, I can see COVID coming. That's going to happen in 10 years' time. I'm going to invest in this new technology, and then I'm going to make millions of billions of dollars. That wasn't the thinking. I mean, there was potentially somebody building a business case, absolutely, but they invested on the hope that a major shaping force that they had identified in future that would likely impact their business needed a solution that they didn't yet have in their toolkit. And we talk a huge amount about prioritizing against those shaping forces in the report From Chaos to Clarity, because it is the only way that you can identify how you can step ahead of all of the competition you've got in your incredibly busy category to jump into a leadership position, and that's the beauty of a crisis. If you have thought through all of the different moves, 12 moves ahead on the board, because you've taken the time as you do for 2 hours a day to get your head into some of that thinking, then you'll always have a better opportunity at succeeding than somebody who's not had that time and made that effort.
Exactly. And I feel like, well, life is so busy, it's hard to think, how can I possibly schedule this time in the midst of all the other stuff I have to do? But in my experience, when I have taken the time to do that, it's given me more capacity in the rest of my work life, because it's become sort of a, like a form of exercise that's given me, allowed me to kind of raise my game throughout the rest of my work life. And I feel like this last year, with all of us working from home, in some ways, it's been an opportunity for us to shift our own work styles around, and we've had to carve new boundaries out and that type of thing. We've spent more time by ourselves. We haven't all been in these big open plan mosh pits. And so there's some aspects of that work dynamic that, however the environment of work looks going forward, I think that's a good thing to hold on to.
That's a lovely way to finish. Thank you so much for what has been a rapid half hour that we have absolutely motored through. It's been a joy working with you, Tom. I know we're going to work together again later this year on some other stuff, which I'm just going to pick up now with the audience. So for everyone watching, thank you so much for coming along. Points of Clarity continues in April, when I'll be interviewing Frisco Chow, the new Chief Executive of Fluency M&C Search, our new data proposition globally, which is going to be super interesting because he has a totally different take on it. Also in April, I think on the 15th, we'll be hosting a clear conversation on the topic of From Chaos to Opportunity. So if you're in financial services, that's all going to be focused on helping financial services marketing leaders to spearhead growth in 2020 on using the lessons that we learned from Chaos to Clarity. So be sure to check out our website and sign up. Finally, please share this. There's a rerun of today's chat now live on YouTube when I hit the stop button on this. Share it with your colleagues and connections. Just search for Clear M&C Saatchi and subscribe for our future content. Thanks so much for coming along. Thank you so much to you, Tom, for all of your time and effort on this. And I hope to see you all at the next one. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks so much.